What's going on, guys? In today's video, we are in the Trailblazer.
Because we are on our way to AutoZone to get an alternator for my car. The Camaro is having some charging issues that I can relate directly back to the alternator because the battery is literally brand new. So I'll be showing you guys how to take out an alternator, replace the alternator, diagnose it, and see if it's the alternator or the battery. We're also going to be using some pretty cheap tools that I believe can be found in most houses, and if not, you can pick up the exact set that I use for $10. That's right, $10. And you, my friend, can replace your alternator. Before we get into the removal process of the alternator, there is one thing that I will say. You might not need an entirely new alternator, but we'll check that later.
Also currently chilling out in the office garage because it is negative 22 degrees outside. Illinois really sucks when it comes to weather like that. But I thought I'd show you guys the cheap tool set that I bought. An 18-piece, $10 combination wrench set from Hyper Tough that I bought at Walmart. And we're going to be seeing if it really is hyper tough or if they bend under too much pressure. It itself is pretty cool. It does come up to, I believe, 17 on the metric side, which is pretty badass. It's metric and standard, so you get the best of both worlds for only $10.
Right, so we're moving on. If you'll notice in the bottom left corner, my battery gauge is way above 14 or 15. You usually want it to sit in between 14 or 15, and if it's anything higher than that, the electrical system needs to be checked out or changed. An easy way for me to determine if it is the alternator that is causing trouble or the battery is to remove this pin from the very top of the alternator. Now, it's safe, don't worry about it, don't have any metal on you, make sure that you're grounded, and you will be fine. Make sure the car is running as well at a steady temperature, and as you'll see when I unplug this pin, the battery gauge reads normally, which means that the alternator is overworking and overcharging the battery. For most cars, instead of just getting an entirely new alternator, all you need is a voltage regulator. In some instances, voltage regulators can be extremely cheap, but in my honest opinion, it is easier to replace your alternator than replace the voltage regulator, simply because so many parts need to be removed and changed, and alternators themselves are kind of a pain in the ass to get apart, especially if, like mine, the top and the base are soldered together. So your new alternators come in and you're thinking, now what? Well, now comes the process of removing your old alternator and replacing it with the new one. And remember, before starting anything that has to do with electronics, always disconnect the battery. Before I remove the belt, I like to take pictures of its place to make sure that everything is in exact order. Well, how do you find this belt tensioner, you ask? It's easy. There are diagrams on the internet where you can find the exact diagram on the belt system or belt diagram, whatever you want to call it, that your car uses, and it'll have detailed information like where your water pump is at, where your belt tensioner is at, where the pulley for your water pump is, where the pulley for your alternator is, but in the alternator's case it technically is its own pulley, so you couldn't really call it that. It's just a quick internet search on your engine type and it should pop up right away. Now, because of the height and size of the 10mm wrench, I was unable to remove the bolts as efficiently as I wanted to, so I switched to a 10mm ratchet, and that sure got the job done. As for the battery terminals, they were size 6, and it might differ for yours, especially if you have a bigger engine. Smaller engines mostly mean that things become smaller, but as you can see here, we're taking off the last bolt, and always be sure to disconnect the wires at the very back of your alternator, as well as the boot that is also in the back. If you look at the back of the alternator, for my car at least, there is a boot as well as a nut and washer that you'll remove, and you should be good to go. Then, once you're completely positive that everything has been removed from the alternator, in order to get it to move, you're good to take it out. So with the new alternator in place, you will start by doing the last thing that you did on the old alternator first on the new alternator. And the last thing that we did on the old alternator was remove the nut and washer as well as the boot on the back. So what we'll be doing first on the new one is putting the nut and washer back on and coupling the boot with it to make sure the wire doesn't become live and to stop it from getting corroded by water. The nut and washer were removed using a 10mm wrench. The removal and retightening process went extremely smooth with this wrench, and we were able to get a lot done. They didn't bend under pressure, and in fact they worked quite well. Didn't, because my car is so old, the boot fell off during the removal process, but that's okay. Just slide it back on. And we are just about done with our alternator replacement. As soon as everything is in place correctly and the bolts line up and they're tightened, all you'll have to do is put the wire that went from the original alternator in the very back with a little clip and put it in the new alternator. And after your alternator is in place, be sure to put the belt back on using the exact same technique we used to get it off. If this video helped you, leave a comment describing what car it helped you with, how much your alternator cost, because I'm kind of interested in some of the prices for these things, and overall what you'd like to see me do next. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in a video a few weeks from now, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.